Hello everyone. Who doesn't love a freshly baked loaf of sourdough? Over the past few months, I've been handing out sourdough starter to friends and family like candy. So today, I thought it's only fair to share my go-to sourdough recipe with all of you. This is a recipe I make time and time again, and it's so basic and easy that you can't go wrong with it. Whether you're new to sourdough or you've baked a few loaves already, I promise you'll love the crispy crust and the soft, airy crumb. I'll share with you the basic recipe that's using just flour, water, and salt, as well as some tips on how to get a nice oven spring and ear to achieve that bakery-style look even if you're a beginner. So let's get started. Firstly, you need a strong sourdough starter that will double or even triple in size within 4 to 8 hours after feeding it, depending on your room temperature. I bake bread once a week, so I keep my starter in the fridge and feed it once a week using a 1:1:1 feeding ratio of starter to dark rye flour to filtered or dechlorinated water. Rye flour is preferred because it has more nutrients than white bread flour for the yeast and bacteria to form. Please see the link in the video description for more details on how to maintain your starter. Before we get started, I want to say that you can use this recipe to make your dough and bake your bread on the same day, or you can bake it the next day if you use cold, bulk fermentation during the process. The cold, slower fermentation in the refrigerator allows for a more pronounced sourdough tang and a more open crumb. This is also ideal for fitting the bread-making process into a busy schedule, as the dough can ferment overnight while you sleep. One prep step is required before making your dough. At night, or 8 to 10 hours before making the dough, take your starter out of the fridge and prepare a levain by mixing 20 grams of sourdough starter, active or unfed starter is fine, with 50 grams of water and 50 grams of white bread flour for 1 loaf of bread. Stir everything together and let it sit at room temperature until it's bubbly and has at least doubled in size. If you want the levain to double in size faster, in 4 to 6 hours, bring your starter to room temperature before making the levain. Or you can place the levain in the oven with the lights turned on to speed up the fermentation process, but make sure the ambient temperature doesn't go above 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees Celsius. About 1 hour before your levain is ready to be used, combine 500 grams of bread flour with 350 grams of water, measured by weight. I use hard unbleached bread flour. The flour you use for sourdough should have a minimum of 12 grams of protein per 100 grams, as this is crucial for the gluten structure, which provides strength, elasticity, and volume to the dough. Flour with less than 12% protein may not develop enough gluten, leading to a dense, flat loaf with poor structure. Mix with a spoon or a dough whisk until no dry flour remains. If you're new to sourdough, you can use a little less water, around 330 grams, to make the dough a bit easier to handle. After mixing, cover the bowl and let the dough rest for 1 hour. This is the autolyse step, where the flour hydrates and the dough starts to develop gluten. I measure all ingredients from the beginning, including the salt, which I always place on top of the bowl to make sure I don't forget to add it. After resting, add 120 grams of levain and 10 grams of salt to the dough. If preferred, add the salt later on, during the third set of stretch and folds. Salt slows down fermentation by inhibiting yeast activity. Delaying its addition allows fermentation to proceed more quickly early on, which can be beneficial in cooler environments or for specific timing. It is also beneficial for high hydration doughs, as the salt can slightly tighten the gluten network, slowing down the hydration process of the flour. Mix everything together with your dough whisk and your hand by pinching and filing until the levain is fully incorporated. You can use a mixer to knead the dough as well. When using a mixer to knead dough, it's important to follow a structured knead, rest, knead cycle to develop the gluten properly without overworking the dough, which can damage the gluten structure. Use the low speed and knead for 8 minutes to combine ingredients and hydrate the flour. The dough should start forming a smooth, elastic structure. Stop the mixer and let the dough rest for 10 minutes. Knead on low speed for another 4 minutes. Next, perform 4 to 5 sets of stretch and folds every 30 minutes. Transfer the dough to a clean bowl or container now or after your stretch and folds. Cover the bowl or container and let the dough rest for 30 minutes. To stretch and fold, wet your hands, grab one side of the dough, stretch it upwards, and fold it over. Rotate the bowl or container 90 degrees and repeat until all 4 sides have been stretched. At the beginning, the dough is sticky, so always wet your hands before handling it so that it doesn't stick to your hands. Cover the bowl or container and let the dough rest for 30 minutes. This is how the dough looks like after the second round of stretch and folds. And after the third round. By the last round of stretch and folds, you will see the dough transform and become less sticky, bouncy, and it will hold its shape better. If you've chosen to add your salt during the third set of stretch and folds, mix the salt with a few drops of water before adding it. This makes it easier to distribute evenly throughout the dough. Sprinkle the dissolved salt solution over the dough. Gently stretch and fold a few times to begin incorporating the salt. Follow up with another 1 to 2 sets of stretch and folds to ensure the salt is evenly distributed. Let the dough bulk ferment until it has increased in size by 50 to 75%, not necessarily doubled. For cold bulk fermentation, place the dough in the fridge for 12 to 18 hours. For room temperature fermentation, let it rise at room temperature for 3 to 4 extra hours after the stretch and folds. Depending on room temperature, warmer kitchens will ferment faster. If you prefer a stronger sourdough flavor and a more open crumb, I recommend the cold bulk fermentation. Use the room temperature bulk fermentation if you're baking on the same day, or if you prefer a milder sourdough flavor. Sprinkle rice flour to coat your proofing basket, banneton, or a bowl lined with a kitchen towel. Rice flour is better than regular flour because it is naturally gluten-free, which means it doesn't absorb moisture as easily as regular flour. This helps create a barrier between the dough and the basket, reducing the chance of sticking. Once the dough has fermented, wet your work surface and gently turn out the dough. For a double batch, divide the dough in half. Pre-shape it into a round ball by folding the edges toward the center. Form it into a rough ball shape. Let it rest for 20 to 30 minutes, then shape it into a round boule or an oval batar. Shape the dough using a stretch and fold technique. Gently grab one end of the dough and stretch it up and away from you, then fold it back onto the center of the dough. Form it into a rough ball shape. Use your hands to gently shape it. To do this, cup the sides of the dough and pull the dough towards you, rotating the loaf as you go for a round boule. Tuck the edges of the dough under, creating a smooth and tight surface on top. For an oval batard, you shape it into a log rather than a round loaf in a similar way. Place the dough seam side up into your well-floured proofing basket. Optionally, you can coat the top of your sourdough loaf with sesame seeds. On a clean plate or shallow bowl, spread an even layer of sesame seeds, white, black, or a mix, to fit the size of your loaf's surface. Gently lift the shaped dough and carefully press the top side into the sesame seeds. Rock it slightly to ensure the seeds adhere evenly. Flip the dough so the sesame-coated side faces down, the bottom, in the banneton. This will ensure the sesame seeds are on top when you turn the loaf out for baking. I cover the proofing baskets with these disposable shower caps, but a towel or plastic wrap works just fine. Let the dough rest for 30 minutes. Then, gently grab one side of the dough, stretch it upwards, and fold it over the dough. Do this for all sides of the dough. If you don't let the dough rest, it will spring back once you pull it, and you won't be able to get the sides to stick to each other. This technique creates extra tension in the dough, giving it a nice rise and more open breadcrumb once baked. Sprinkle some rice flour on top. Cover the dough and let it proof at room temperature for 3 to 4 more hours when using room temperature bulk fermentation, or for 5 to 6 hours when using cold bulk fermentation. The dough is ready when it passes the poke test, a slight dent left by your finger that springs back slowly. If the dough springs back quickly, it's underproofed. If it springs back very slowly, it's properly proofed and ready to bake. Finally, if it never springs back, the dough is overproofed. Place the Dutch oven with the lid in your oven and preheat to 465 degrees Fahrenheit or 240 degrees Celsius for at least 30 minutes before baking. A Dutch oven helps create a moist baking environment perfect for sourdough. Carefully turn the dough out onto a piece of parchment paper, seam side down. Brush off any excess rice flour. Don't worry if your dough is not super firm like you see in most sourdough video recipes. This consistency is just fine, and I promise it will produce amazing results. It's normal for the dough to spread a bit, but it's important to score it very fast and place it in the oven right away. Score the top of the dough with a sharp knife or blade to allow for controlled expansion during baking. If you want to score more intricate designs, use a fine mesh sieve to lightly and evenly sprinkle rice flour over the top of the dough. A thin layer is sufficient. Too much can obscure the design. Dusting the surface of your dough with rice flour is an excellent way to make your scored design stand out more after baking. Rice flour remains pale white during baking, while the exposed areas of the dough, from scoring, darken and develop a rich crust color. This contrast makes the scored patterns more visible and striking. Place the parchment paper with the dough into the preheated Dutch oven, cover with the lid, and bake for 25 minutes. To create extra steam during the baking process, you can add 2 to 3 ice cubes into your Dutch oven alongside the parchment paper. Steam helps keep the surface of the dough moist during the first part of baking. delaying the hardening of the crust. This allows the bread to expand fully and develop a good rise oven spring. If you're using an enameled Dutch oven, I don't recommend this as you can ruin your Dutch oven. Instead, you can use a spray bottle to spritz water directly onto the bread. If you prefer a bigger, more pronounced ear, use the 7-minute double score method. That is, after baking the bread for 7 minutes, remove the lid and make a second, deeper score, 4 to 5 millimeter deep, along the same line of your initial score. Cover the pot with the lid and continue baking for 18 more minutes. This double score method produces clean, dramatic scoring patterns, giving your sourdough a professional, bakery-style look. Here you can see the rise from the first score and from the second score. Remove the lid and bake for another 20 to 25 minutes, or until the crust is deep golden brown and the loaf sounds hollow when tapped on the bottom. Once the bread is baked, carefully transfer it to a wire rack to cool for at least 1 hour before slicing. Cutting too soon may result in a gummy interior. The crispy crust and airy crumb are amazing. I hope you enjoyed baking sourdough bread with me. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more baking tutorials. Happy baking!